Hello everybody, it is Micah and happy FanFest 2021. Yes, last night was the first night of FanFest for Final Fantasy XIV, and we got a bunch of information in the keynote address that kicked it off. So I wanted to do today, for those of you who were not able to watch or just didn't want to watch the whole thing, is give you a quick summary of the information from the keynote. Because, well, there was a fair amount of information, there was not a lot of information, if that makes sense. Yoshida told us about a lot of new things, but he just didn't give us a lot of details about those things. And I'm going to begin exactly where they did, with the new job. The keynote began with Yoshida stepping on stage in this outfit and wielding a giant scythe, similar to what we saw Xenos wielding in the full trailer just before. And while we already mostly figured out that the job was going to use a scythe as a main weapon, the rest was pretty vague. But we now know the job is called the Reaper and is a new creation that is not based on anything we have in the franchise to date. It is a melee DPS that calls upon this avatar from the void to help it in battle, and it's really flashy in all the best ways. The only requirement to unlock this new job is to of course own Endwalker and have at least one job already at level 70. There's no base class, but it will share maiming gear with the Dragoon. The unlock quest will be located in Ul'dah after the new expansion goes live, so Yoshida recommends logging out there prior to the 6.0 update. I will admit, this job totally looks super fun, and I will be leveling it up. Probably not immediately, but it will not be ignored. And that spin at the end, oof, that looks good. But anyway, let's move on. We got a preview of some of the new maps, beginning with one we have not seen before called Labrinthos. This area with its harlequin pattern in the sky kind of gave me some Clockwork City vibes. It obviously doesn't look like Clockwork City, just kind of gave me those vibes. Yoshida said he would not reveal much about this area, trying to keep things mysterious and all, but he did say that this area was actually underground and protected by a large dome with a big ol' artificial sun at its peak. He also made an off-the-cuff statement about, where could this be? Making me think it's under one of our current zones. My personal guess would be the hinterlands, but that's just my guess. We also got a closer look at Thavener and Razat Han, and this place is more colorful than I previously thought. Yoshida even mentioned the colors, stating that the developers took a lot of time thinking about and meticulously choosing the colors for everything. Not only the buildings, but even the leaves on the trees and the water. Everything was apparently very thought out. And that means there was a lot of thinking, because there's a lot of colors. It's a big rainbow. Next, he showed us concept art for a zone, but he wouldn't give us any information, not even a name, to avoid any spoilers. Now, I know this is not the secret zone that we have in every expansion, because, well, those are secret. And being concept art only, there's really not much you can determine from the shot, but he did reference Ilmeg when talking about it. So perhaps this is where the source's pixie population resides? I guess we'll find out soon enough. There were a few new screenshots of Garlemald, or what's left of Garlemald, I could say, because this place got wrecked. Which is a little disappointing, since Garlemald has always been this fantastical, evil empire, and it fell off screen, which wasn't very satisfying. We never got to experience Garlemald. Next, we got to see more of the moon, because it's not just a barren white wasteland. The area's name was called Marlomatorium. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I haven't spoken Latin since I was a teen, but it roughly translates into the Sea of Lament. And as you can see, it's full of Ascian architecture, furnishings, all that fun stuff. So it's definitely something to do with Ascian history, or maybe the Ascian present. I mean, we don't know. Finally, we got a small tour of the new player hub for the expansion, Old Charlene, which is a big, beautiful city that looks like it was carved from white marble. A quick thing that Yoshida mentioned about this place that I found really interesting was it, along with El Amigo and Ishgard, were supposed to be starting cities in version 1, but they were cut due to time, which was a relief to Yoshida since 6 starting cities is a bit much, and I agree. But coming here in the end is just another way they're coming full circle in this expansion, a theme we've heard often so far, and I cannot wait to get here. He moved on to talk about some of the major characters we will be seeing, all of which were profiled in the trailer. One is, of course, Estinian, who was apparently added because he is a fan favorite, and there's lots of requests for more of him, so he got another hurrah. The dragon he's riding is called Vitra, and is part of the first brood. The other character he talked about was this tall, white-haired Elizin that Y'shtola is yelling at in Old Charlene. Now, he wouldn't tell us anything about this man or even his name, but if you have the Encyclopedia Eorzea, you can find out who this character is quite easily. I know, but I'm not going to spoil it for you. Next, a couple new enemies were profiled, the first of which being the Mega Sisters. And even though we've seen the Mega Sisters before in Final Fantasies 4 and 10 especially, Yoshida stated that this was a new version of the sisters, a unique interpretation of them, and completely different from the Mega Sisters we've seen before. The Leporites were next, a beast tribe that apparently lives on the moon, and if you're familiar with Final Fantasy IV, you should recognize these creatures almost immediately since they're based on the Hummingway from Final Fantasy IV, who also lived on the moon. What their role is here, we have no idea, but apparently they play a really big part of the story. Yoshida also touched on some of the new content coming our way. He mentioned Pandemonium, the 8-man raid again, but again, didn't give us any information about it. He also brought up Island Sanctuary, saying that the popularity it's already had in the community was surprising to the devs. They apparently did not expect this level of excitement over it. And while he did not give us any details, he did say they have plans on updating it throughout the Endwalker expansion. The only big reveal we got when it came to content was the name of the new Alliance raid, Myths of the Realm, which will be based on the stories and the myths surrounding the 12, and that makes me super excited, since I've been playing this game for 10 years now, and I've always wanted to know more about the 12, especially since they had a fairly big role in version 1, but have been almost completely forgotten ever since. There were a couple other big reveals, the first one being Malviera. Yes, they broke down and they gave you bunny boys. Yoshida said that there was never an intention to create Malviera or female Hrothgar, but there was such an outcry from the community that they just could not ignore it. So the designers worked themselves really hard to make it happen. And while there's no female Hrothgar at the moment, they're in development and will be making an appearance as soon as possible. The reason they were not released together is because they had the Malviera done, so they didn't feel the need to hold them back until both were complete. Makes sense to me. Another big announcement was the introduction of a new data center for Oceania. Now, this did not get a lot of attention, but this is a pretty big deal. It costs millions to set something like this up, not to mention the money it takes to maintain it. And the fact that Square Enix decided to make that sort of investment bodes extremely well for the future of Final Fantasy XIV. It makes me believe that we're going to be playing this game for a long time yet. They wanted to have them up and running by the expansion's release, and they've been in the works for a long time. But once COVID-19 hit, our wrench was thrown into the works. The people who normally would have traveled to Australia to oversee the installation couldn't, so they had to figure out how to do it remotely. They're speculating that the Oceania data center should be up around 6.1, fingers crossed. And now the news we've all been waiting for, the release date. Now this kind of surprised me, because I was assuming that we were going to have about a September release date, October at the latest. But the release date for Endwalker turned out to be November 23rd, 2021. Apparently this was a lot later than they wanted it to be, but the story of Endwalker with the resolution of the Hydaelyn and Zodiac storyline and the amount of content that's actually coming with release is going to be larger than any other expansion to date. So a lot of work had to go into it, and the issues caused by COVID-19 and the people working from home and everything did not help. They just really had no choice but to push it into November. And I don't know if you're with me here, but I'm okay with that. Game development is a hard and a thankless job, and I would rather them take an extra month than push themselves too hard with all the stuff going on. So I'm more than happy to be a little patient. If you want to pre-order Endwalker, you can right now because pre-orders are open. If you pre-order, you are, as a bonus, going to get a Pelham Minion as well as a Menfina earring, which will give you an experience bonus just as the earrings did from previous expansions, but this time all the way up to level 80. They also explained they were not going to have any physical game discs available since the majority only use digital downloads these days, but that does not mean there are not physical collector's editions available. They will just come with a game code instead of discs. I have heard from people that the physical collector's edition is already sold out, but I'd be surprised if they didn't have a second and possibly even a third run. So if you want them, you need to keep an eye out. I was able to snag one last night, but even with refreshing the Square Enix store until they went live, I was still put into a queue with over 9,000 people ahead of me. I still got one though, thankfully. I usually don't buy physical collector's editions, but this one comes with a statue of everybody's favorite Warrior of Light, a pin of Azim, a plush, and some prints. I mean, it's pretty snazzy all around, and that statue is honestly what sold me on it. I'm a sucker for collectibles. The last thing I want to cover before I end this is housing. Because while Ishgard housing is not being released until 6.1, Yoshida said that in the meantime, they are working on finding a way to provide even more housing to more people to help meet demands and even change the way that players acquire a house. He said they're looking at their options and they know the most popular player suggestion is a housing lotto. But with the coding, it's not likely possible. They're not going to write it off just yet though. He had no details to give because they just don't know exactly how they're going to handle it yet, but they're working on it. And I think that's all I have for you. I'm sorry it took me so long to get this out. I wanted to get it out yesterday, but I was really not feeling well when I woke up and I was just sitting here feeling like I stood in the yuck. So I am feeling better now. Thanks for asking, but it took me a while to get the oomph to get up and put this together. I do have a live letter video in production as well, so that should be out later today as long as I keep feeling good. So fingers crossed. But be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have not already. If you want to, of course, no pressure. You can also follow me on Twitter, which is linked in the description. And with that, as per the usual, it has been a hoot. Until next time, have fun.